When my wife learned that Bai Yuguang had fallen to her death at the hospital, she cried so uncontrollably that she nearly broke down. She completely disregarded the forensic conclusions presented to her. Instead, she firmly accused me of being the murderer. Not stopping there, she even coached our daughter to provide false testimony. It was through her manipulations that I was sent to prison. While incarcerated, I endured endless torment, and my right hand was left permanently disabled. I wholeheartedly believed that once I walked out of prison, my debt to Bai Yuguang, Liu Ryan, would be paid in full. For the rest of my life, I could finally sever all ties with the Liu family. However, I never imagined that Liu Ryan had no intention of letting me off so easily. Her goal was not mere revenge. She wanted my life. Stepping out of the prison gates, I clutched a worn-out backpack and hurriedly ran toward home. It had been 10 years since Liu Ryan falsely accused me and sent me to prison. During this time, my greatest worry had always been for my parents and younger sister. No matter how many letters I wrote, they never once replied. Now, having served my sentence and being released, I could finally see for myself whether they were safe. Thinking of this, I nervously swallowed, quickening my pace with every step. At that moment, the large screen in the distance suddenly flickered. A few words appeared, and a glance out of the corner of my eye froze me in place. I stood rooted to the spot, utterly paralyzed. On the plaza's massive electronic billboard, previously filled with advertisements, a glaring message now read, "Zhang He, murderer, may you die a miserable death." Cold sweat dripped down from my forehead. Screech! A sharp sound of brakes filled the air. Several luxury cars stopped right in front of me. I instantly recognized the license plate that had haunted me in countless nightmares. It was Liu Ryan's car. Before I could react, the car door opened, and Liu Ryan, adorned in a luxurious dress, stepped out. Beside her stood a graceful young girl, my daughter, Zhang Lingling. The memory of them working together to fabricate evidence and send me to prison resurfaced, and the pain of betrayal swept over me once again. I could barely breathe. Seeing me, Liu Ryan sneered with disdain. "Zhang He, you're still alive after all this. Should have died in there." I lowered my head, forcing myself to suppress the fear rising inside me. With a hoarse voice, I said, "Liu Ryan, I've served my time. I've paid the price I owed. From now on, I have nothing to do with the Liu family. I just want to go home and see my family." "In your dreams." The sight of my face seemed to reignite her rage. "You remind me of that pitiful Bai Yuguang." Her voice sharpened as she continued. "How can a mere 10 years atone for your sins? From the moment you caused Joe Lizzie to fall into a coma, you should have known. You'll never be free of this for the rest of your life." Her eyes brimmed with hatred. "You're just standing there, Zhang He. Men, break his legs." Several burly men rushed forward and pinned me down. They raised the steel rods in their hands high above their heads. Crack! A sharp pain shot through my leg bone. I couldn't help but scream in agony. Tears fell uncontrollably down my face. When they finally let me go, I saw my right leg hanging unnaturally forward. Liu Ryan gave a subtle glance. Zhang Lingling immediately barked an order at me. "Hey, old man, hurry up and kneel to beg mom for forgiveness." Looking at the daughter, whose features bore a slight resemblance to mine, it felt as if a knife was twisting violently in my heart. But to survive, I had no choice but to drag my injured body, limping as I crawled to kneel before them. "I'm sorry. This is all my fault. Please have mercy on me." Before my words even faded, my daughter's stiletto heel slammed down onto my leg with force. Her voice was filled with rage. "This is all your fault. If it weren't for you ruining Uncle Joe's life, Mom and I would have been living happily by now. Do you really think a hollow apology can make up for it?" The sharp heel pierced into my leg, stomping again and again. Soon, my flesh was mangled and bloody. Blood splattered everywhere. I struggled helplessly, screaming in excruciating pain. Liu Ryan, however, simply stood to the side, laughing gleefully. Only when Zhang Lingling grew tired did she step forward. Looking down at my barely conscious self, she said, "Didn't you say you wanted to see those worthless family members of yours? I can show you a little mercy and help you fulfill that wish. But you're bad luck. It comes at a price. You'll need to meet my demands first." As her words sank in, the bodyguards carried several boxes down from the car. They shook the contents out onto the ground. The line of scattered objects stretched on for several meters. Countless thumbtacks, their sharp points glinting coldly, were spread out, reflecting clearly in my eyes. My pupils contracted in shock. Liu Ryan and Zhang Lingling looked down at me. "You will crawl on your knees to the hospital entrance and beg Joe Lizzie for forgiveness. Otherwise," Liu Ryan waved her hand. A girl was dragged out of the car. At a single glance, my heart clenched in unbearable pain. It was my sister. I couldn't even imagine the torment she had suffered during my 10 years in prison. The once soft and adorable girl was now frail and emaciated. When she was yanked to the ground, she kept begging desperately for mercy, as if terrified of being beaten. When her eyes met mine, her body collapsed, and she let out a heart-wrenching cry. "Brother!" I tried to get up, but Zhang Lingling kicked me down again. Liu Ryan looked at me with arrogance. "I'll give you half an hour to finish crawling. If you don't, I'll have this wretched girl do it in your place." Hearing Liu Ryan's words, both my sister and I turned pale with horror, gritting my teeth. I forced a sentence out of my throat. "Liu Ryan, this grudge is between you and me. It has nothing to do with my sister." A flash of bitterness crossed Liu Ryan's face. "Who said this is just between us? Zhang He, stop trying to paint yourself as some martyr. If it weren't for that family of yours supporting you, would you have dared to harm Joe Lizzie so recklessly? They were the ones who encouraged you." As she spoke, she glanced impatiently at her watch. "You have 29 minutes left." Hearing those words, I understood completely. Liu Ryan's hatred for me had seeped so deeply into her bones that she could no longer distinguish right from wrong, even though she knew my family was innocent. To satisfy her twisted love for Joe Lizzie, she was willing to ruin their lives entirely. I remained motionless. Liu Ryan grew impatient. She waved her hand. The bodyguards forced me onto the bed of thumbtacks. The sharp nails tore through the fabric of my pants, piercing deeply into my flesh. As blood began to gush out, my sister screamed and struggled, rushing to me and wrapping her arms around me. "This is illegal. I won't let you hurt my brother," she cried out. But before she could finish her sentence, Zhang Lingling charged forward and delivered a ruthless kick to her stomach. My sister's frail body couldn't withstand the force of the blow and was sent flying backward, landing heavily on the ground. Immediately after, several bodyguards stepped forward and dragged her back up. "You're so eager to stand up for this trash, huh? In that case, you'll take his punishment instead." Seeing my sister's frightened yet defiant gaze, Zhang Lingling spoke cruelly. She made a gesture, and the burly men began dragging my sister toward the bed of thumbtacks. I scrambled and rolled forward desperately, pleading in a hoarse voice, "I'll take it all. Just spare her, please." But my blood-related daughter showed not the slightest hint of sympathy, not even a trace. She hated me to the core. When she sent me to prison, she screamed at me, wishing it had been me who fell from the building. Zhang Lingling signaled with her eyes, and the bodyguards immediately restrained me. I watched helplessly as my sister was dragged away, pinned firmly to the ground. The sharp nails pierced through her skin. She let out constant screams of agony, her blood seeping from her struggling limbs. My whole body trembled. I fought with all my strength, but I couldn't break free from their grip. All I could do was shake uncontrollably and close my eyes in despair. condemning myself as a useless brother. But even this wasn't enough for Liu Ryan to let me go. Pointing at me, she shouted fiercely, "Who gave you permission to close your eyes? Keep them open and watch that wretched girl." In no time, someone brought tape. They forced my eyelids open. And the sight of my sister's torment filled my vision. Every scream she let out felt like 1,000 cuts to my soul. The wind and dust stung my exposed eyes, making me tremble in pain. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. Seeing this, Zhang Lingling only grew angrier. She showed no pity, instead becoming even more enraged. "You felt no guilt when you pushed Uncle Joe off the building, and now you have the nerve to cry? To punish me further." She ordered the bodyguards to drag me onto the same path. They forced my body to roll over the remaining thumbtacks that hadn't pierced my sister's flesh, claiming it was all for the convenience of the sanitation workers. "Your parents were garbage collectors. As their son, how could you not think of them?" With those words, they stretched me out like a rag, forcing me to roll forward. The sharp thumbtacks pierced my chest, neck, and back. My screams echoed in the air. Liu Ryan and Zhang Lingling followed closely behind, their cold, indifferent eyes fixed on the scene. Dragged and rolled for hundreds of meters, I, fresh out of prison, was utterly exhausted. My consciousness began to blur. I thought relief was near. But then a bucket of cold water was poured over me. The water hitting my wounds sent waves of searing pain through my body. I gasped, opening my eyes in shock, clutching aimlessly with my hands, until I fell to urns. Crack! The urns shattered. The ashes spilled out and I began choking violently, barely able to open my eyes. Liu Ryan stood before me, mockingly clapping her hands. "What a dutiful son you are. Seeing the urns wasn't enough. You had to spill them to have a closer look." For the first few seconds, her words didn't register. But when they finally did, I panicked, crawling backward in horror. My movement stirred the air, scattering the ashes further. Realizing what had happened, I desperately threw myself forward, trying to gather the drifting ashes with my hands. Liu Ryan, still laughing, ordered her bodyguards to fan the air with their clothes. "Your parents are just ashes now, and you went and spilled them everywhere. You're a worthless creature. You don't even deserve to live." I stared at her in rage and despair. Why? Why did you kill my parents? How are you any different from a murderer?" Zhang Lingling replied coldly, "You've misunderstood, Mom. We never stooped to something so disgusting as you did. We just sent them the photos of you in prison with your severed hand. Who knew they wouldn't be able to handle it? And then ... well, they were gone. If Mom hadn't handled their funerals and taken in your sister, how could you possibly still have any family left? You should be thanking us." I glanced at my unconscious sister, unable to tolerate Zhang Lingling's words any longer. "I'll fight you to the death." With nothing to lose, I lunged at them. Liu Ryan and Zhang Lingling were startled, but quickly regained their composure. The bodyguards pinned me down forcefully. Liu Ryan, now furious, spat angrily. "I thought you had finally realized your mistakes. Turns out you were just trying to deceive me. You dare attack me in front of everyone? I guess I need to teach you a proper lesson." With those words, she retrieved a rope from the car and ordered her men, "Bind the two of them to the back of the car. I'll drag them all the way to Joe Lizzie's nursing home." My sister, already unconscious from the pain, was roughly handled as they tied her up. My only remaining arm was tightly secured to the rope. Liu Ryan and her daughter got into the car. Zhang Lingling leaned out of the window, her face alight with glee. Uncle Joe's nursing home is still more than 10 kilometers away. He. Take this time to reflect on your mistakes, Zhang Lingling sneered. Before I could respond, Liu Ryan slammed her foot on the accelerator. The car shot forward like an arrow. The engine roared, and I felt as though my flesh was being ripped apart, the searing pain unbearable. Watching the trail of blood left behind on the ground, I clung desperately to my sister. But with my injured, incomplete arm, I couldn't fully hold her. In desperation, I used my body as a shield, protecting her as tightly as I could. Gravel and dirt ground into my wounds, and sweat drenched my face. I was so numb to the pain that I could barely feel it anymore. Only one thought echoed in my mind: no matter what happens, I won't let my sister endure any more harm. The bloody trail stretched out behind us. I gritted my teeth and endured. I didn't know how much time had passed before the car finally began to slow down. Struggling, I opened my eyes. I looked around, and in the quiet surroundings, a towering building stood out prominently. I immediately recognized it as the city's most luxurious nursing home on the outskirts. The bodyguards came forward and cut the ropes, which were nearly frayed to the point of breaking. My back was covered in blood, and my legs were worn down to the bone. But Liu Ryan and Zhang Lingling showed no hint of pity. Their expressions were cold, as my sister and I were dragged into Joe Lizzie's hospital room. Inside, the walls were plastered with photos of Joe Lizzie and Liu Ryan together, looking intimate. Even a single glance at them felt like a dagger to the heart. A sinking feeling of dread rose in my heart. Liu Ryan had always been fixated on Joe Lizzie's fall from the window. She refused to believe my explanation that the nurse forgot to deliver his painkillers. She was convinced that I couldn't tolerate Joe Lizzie, and had pushed him out of the window myself. Now that Joe Lizzie lay unconscious, had Liu Ryan really brought me here just to hear an apology? I couldn't shake the doubt. The sound of Liu Ryan's high heels grew louder as she approached. My fear escalated with each step. She stopped by the window, pointed outside, and said coldly, "They say blood debts must be repaid with blood. You made Joe Lizzie fall from this height once. Now it's your turn to experience it." Zhang Lingling chimed in with a cruel laugh. "Mom said, if you won't jump yourself, we'll throw your so-called family down instead." My sister was dragged to another window, her body half dangling outside. The nursing home's ceiling was high, and Joe Lizzie's room was on the top floor. The distance from here to the ground was at least 10 meters. Zhang Lingling looked at me smugly and said, "If you sever ties with that woman, let her fend for herself. I might ask Mom to spare you." My throat was raw and filled with the taste of blood, but I summoned all my strength to refuse. "No! This is my only family. I absolutely will not abandon her." Zhang Lingling's face darkened instantly. Zhang Lingling stared at me coldly. "She's your family? Then what about me? You've never considered me your daughter." Hearing her irrational accusation, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Liu Ryan and I had been brought together by an arranged marriage. Though I had feelings for her, I knew she didn't feel the same and never forced it. When Zhang Lingling was born, I devoted myself entirely to her. I stayed at home to care for her, handling almost everything in her life. But after my father's investment failure and the Zhang family's bankruptcy, Liu Ryan changed. Once respectful and distant, she became openly close with Joe Lizzie, and even deprived me of my parental rights. She made Zhang Lingling call Joe Lizzie dad. Gradually, Zhang Lingling came to believe that only Joe Lizzie cared for her, treating me with rejection and disgust. After 10 years in prison, any feelings I had for them were long gone. So when Zhang Lingling questioned me now, I felt nothing. Instead, I let out a cold laugh. "I'm just a worthless convict fresh out of prison. I don't deserve to be your father, Miss Liu." With those words, I didn't hesitate for a second. Summoning all my strength, I climbed out the window. Surrounding the nursing home, there were many trees and shrubs planted below. As I fell, the branches broke under my weight, lessening the impact slightly. Even so, my body hit the ground with a heavy thud. I felt as though my internal organs were about to burst from my mouth, and immediately spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. A large dent was left in the ground where I landed. By now, my entire body was stained with blood, even my hair matted with dried, dark red stains. The loud crash startled my sister awake. When she saw my condition, She let out a piercing scream, crying desperately. "Brother, how are you? I'm so scared." Zhang Lingling, seemingly annoyed by her cries, lashed out and kicked my sister several times. She then turned to Liu Ryan, yelling angrily, "Mom, throw her down too, and do it hard." Hearing this, Liu Ryan, ignoring any promises she might have made earlier, nodded to the bodyguards without hesitation. My sister screamed in terror as they shoved her toward the window. This was a different window, with little to no vegetation outside. If she fell, she would undoubtedly hit the concrete below and die on the spot. "No! Sister!" Panic engulfed me as I screamed hoarsely, ignoring the searing pain in my body. Summoning an immense burst of energy, I scrambled to my feet. With every ounce of strength I had, I crawled and lunged toward the other side. Throwing my body over hers, I shielded her completely, absorbing the deadly impact myself. The force caused me to cough up a massive mouthful of blood. My vision blurred, and I blacked out completely. Moments later, Liu Ryan and Zhang Lingling descended from the building. Liu Ryan nudged my motionless body with her foot. When I didn't respond, she frowned in dissatisfaction. "Stop pretending. Do you think this is enough to erase everything you've done? None of you are allowed to come near him," Liu Ryan ordered coldly. "Let him lie here. I want to see if he'll save his sister's life or keep pretending to be unconscious." With her explicit command, all her subordinates withdrew along with her and Zhang Lingling. I didn't know how much time had passed. A sharp pain brought me back to my senses. Opening my eyes, I saw a stray dog gnawing at my ankle. I barely managed to shoo it away. Frantically, I checked my sister's condition. Fortunately, aside from the wounds caused by the thumbtacks, I didn't see any immediate signs of other injuries. But I dared not take any chances. Falling from such a height often leads to internal injuries. I had to get her to a hospital for a proper examination as quickly as possible. Summoning my last reserves of strength, I crawled into the nursing home. I tried to seek help from the caretakers, but their expressions were conflicted. "I'm sorry, sir," one of them said hesitantly. "Miss Liu warned us before she left. If any of us help you, it would be seen as defying her." The metallic taste of blood filled my throat. My chest ached with every breath. Why? Even after exacting her revenge, why wouldn't she leave me a path to survive? As my heart broke under the weight of despair, my sister suddenly convulsed. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Panic consumed me. I collapsed to my knees in front of the caretakers, bowing repeatedly, begging, "Please, I'm begging you, save my sister. She's only in her 20s. Please, give her a chance to live. I don't want her to die. She's all I have left." The sound of my head hitting the ground echoed through the hall. Blood trickled down my forehead. But I no longer cared about the pain. Finally, a young nurse, unable to bear it any longer, brought a gurney out from the storage room. "We really can't help you," she said softly. "There's a hospital nearby. You'll have to push her there yourself." I thanked her profusely, lifting my sister onto the gurney. With my battered body barely holding together, I pushed her step by agonizing step toward the hospital. Crossing the hospital doors, I grabbed a nurse's arm, pleading desperately, "Help! Please save my sister." The world went black, and I collapsed heavily onto the floor. When I opened my eyes again, I stared at the gray-white walls in front of me, feeling disoriented. I couldn't tell if I was alive or dead. The nurse monitoring me noticed I was awake. Sighed in relief. Unable to resist, she asked, "Sir, what happened to you? How did you get so severely injured?" Her question jolted my memory, and the metallic taste of blood returned to my throat. I struggled to sit up. "My sister, the girl who came with me. What happened to her? Where is she?" The nurse panicked slightly and quickly pressed me back onto the bed. "She's fine," she reassured me. "She only suffered a few puncture wounds and has already gone to get her medication. You shouldn't move around unnecessarily. You have severe internal bleeding." We barely managed to save you. If your wounds reopen, it could be fatal." Hearing that my sister was safe, I let out a sigh of relief and lay back down on the bed. The pain from my wounds was excruciating. Exhausted, I closed my eyes. I wondered how much longer I would remain trapped in this hell. Just then, the door to my hospital room creaked open. My sister entered, thanking the nurse who had changed my bandages. She then ran to my bedside, tears streaming down her face. Gently, she placed her trembling hand on my blanket. Tears continued to drip from her reddened eyes. "Brother, does it still hurt? It's all my fault for not being able to protect you. I let those to drag you back and torture you. If only you had chosen to push me down instead." Her voice broke as she gasped for air between sobs. My sister was crying so uncontrollably that my heart ached just looking at her. I quickly tried to comfort her. "Don't cry, my dear sister. I'm fine now. With the anesthetic, I can't feel any pain at all. Those two, Ryan and her daughter, they hate me. They're trying everything to torture me to avenge Joe Lizzie. Even if you had taken my place, it wouldn't have helped. They'd still find even crueler, more vicious ways to harm us. The good news is, at least you're still able to move around. It's better than the two of us being stuck here in the hospital, right?" She shook her head in anguish, her young, tear-streaked face filled with confusion. "No, it's not like that. Joe Lizzie, he jumped from the window himself. What does that have to do with you, brother? You don't owe them anything. Why won't those suggest leave us alone?" I gently patted her head, feeling deeply ashamed. "It's my fault for making you endure all of this." My sister shook her head firmly. "No! You're the best brother in the whole world." Hearing her words, my eyes welled up with tears of gratitude. In my weakest moments, having her by my side to comfort me made all the pain I'd suffered seem insignificant. I placed my hand on her shoulder, holding back my emotions without speaking for a long time. A month later, watching our dwindling savings, I decided to discharge myself from the hospital, taking my sister with me. I returned to our parents' old home, only to find it reduced to rubble. Holding back my grief, I knocked on a neighbor's door to inquire. That's when I learned the truth. After I was sent to prison, Ryan had seized the opportunity to demand damages. Faced with an astronomical sum, my parents couldn't possibly pay it off. They went to plead with Ryan for mercy, but she only left them with a single cold statement: "If your parents can't repay it, I'll make him pay for it in prison." Out of desperation and fear for my safety, my parents sold the house and car they'd spent decades building up, and even my sister was forcibly taken to the Liu family as a servant. Under the guise of working off the debt, your parents were kind and honest people. The neighbor said, "We all tried to persuade them to fight back or take their case against the Liu family elsewhere, but they were too scared something would happen to you in prison. They chose to endure it, thinking that if they could just hold out until you were released from prison, the nightmare would end. Your father even sold his liver and kidney to scrape together the money. But when they learned about what you were going through in prison, the two of them couldn't take it any longer. They both passed away." I closed my eyes, powerless and overwhelmed. My sister, crying, grabbed my arm. "Brother, don't let guilt consume you. We've already lost so much. Don't let it destroy you too." I stayed silent for a long time, before forcing a smile. "I'll keep moving forward." We rented a small, rundown room to live in temporarily, to make ends meet. Once I had mostly recovered from my injuries, we found part-time jobs with the help of kind neighbors. My sister worked as a cleaner, while I delivered parcels. Life was tough, but we managed to get by. I thought our days would gradually settle into peace. But one day, while I was on a delivery run, I suddenly received a call from my sister. Before I could speak, Ryan's arrogant voice came through the line. "Jong-hee, you worthless scum. I thought after everything that happened, you would have learned your lesson. But you still dared to provoke me? Your sister is in my hands now. if you want her to live." Her words hung ominously, and my heart dropped. I couldn't think of anything else. Jumping onto my electric bike, I sped to the location she mentioned. As soon as I entered the building, I saw Liu Ryan and Zhang Lingling surrounded by a crowd of people. They were scolding someone furiously. When I got closer and saw who was lying on the ground, my vision turned red with rage. My sister was kneeling on the ground, her clothes torn to shreds by them, desperately trying to cover herself with her hands, her face streaked with tears. I quickly took off my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Standing up, I glared at Liu Ryan, my voice shaking with anger. "Liu Ryan, what do you think you're doing this time?" Faced with my question, Liu Ryan didn't even bother to respond. The people around her wore mocking expressions, smirking at me with disdain. My family was once well known in the business community, but after the scandal with Joe Lizzie erupted, and Liu Ryan sent me to prison herself, these people had quickly learned to read her signals. They knew she hated me to the core, and went out of their way to make my life difficult. Even the prisoners who targeted me in jail, many were incited by these very people. With just a glance from Liu Ryan, someone immediately stepped forward, speaking on her behalf. "You should be asking what Liu Ryan wants from you. She was generous enough to forgive you, and yet you send this filthy girl to harass her? And under the guise of being a cleaner? I think this is just an excuse. You've already ruined the love of Liu Ryan's life, and now you're trying to cling to her with these petty tricks? If we don't show you your place, do you think Liu Ryan is so easily bullied?" Voices around me chimed in with mocking taunts, all accusing my sister and me of harassing Liu Ryan. I was furious. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone. I opened the order and showed it to them. "This is the app we use for part-time work," I explained. It clearly stated, "Liu Group requested cleaning services. That's the only reason my sister came here." Since my release from prison, I had never sought to bother Liu Ryan. It was always her setting traps for me, even nearly costing us our lives before. Faced with my evidence, Zhang Lingling scoffed dismissively. She slapped the phone out of my hand, her tone dripping with impatience. "That's just your side of the story. Who knows what schemes you're plotting behind the scenes? Let's say, hypothetically, Mom placed the order to make the office clean and tidy, but it's still filthy here, and you've wasted our time. Shouldn't you be compensating us?" Gritting my teeth, I bowed my head. "My sister's mistakes are my responsibility. I'm willing to pay." "You say that so easily," Zhang Lingling sneered with a twisted smile. "This is custom marble flooring imported from abroad. The total cost was several million, and that filthy woman scratched the design. You must pay the full price for damages. Do you have that kind of money, you worthless scum?" I lowered my head, remaining silent. Zhang Lingling exchanged a glance with Liu Ryan. "All right then," she said slyly. "We're not unreasonable people. Let me cut open her bra and check her body for hidden weapons. If there's nothing, we'll consider it Mom's mistake. We'll pretend none of this ever happened today. We'll even pay you the wages afterward," Zhang Lingling added mockingly, pulling a fruit knife from behind her. The blade glinted under the harsh light, and the onlookers fell silent for a moment, before bursting into laughter. A few men ogled my sister's chest lewdly, making crude, contemptuous remarks. "With a figure like that, there's nothing worth looking at. Miss, if you're really going to check her body, you'll probably hurt your own eyes. This is barely worth a glance, not even enough to ruin my appetite for dinner. Our laundry board at home is more interesting to look at. Did you see those scars on her skin? What are those anyway? Couldn't they be from some contagious disease? Disgusting!" Filthy words surrounded us from every direction. I couldn't contain my fury any longer. Glaring at Zhang Lingling, I said firmly, "Every detail of the platform's orders is traceable. If you have a complaint, you should contact the staff directly. This is no excuse for you to humiliate a young girl. This concerns her reputation and dignity." What gives you the right to do this? Zhang Lingling raised her eyebrows disdainfully. Reputation? Now you're talking about reputation? When you falsely accused Uncle Joe and ruined my mom's reputation, did you ever consider our names? Today, I will inspect her clothes. What can you do about it? As she finished speaking, Zhang Lingling waved her hand. Several bodyguards rushed toward us. The bodyguards separated us and pinned me down. I could only watch helplessly as Zhang Lingling approached my sister with the fruit knife. I struggled desperately, unable to imagine the humiliation and pain my sister was about to endure. As I screamed in fury and despair, my sister suddenly lunged forward and bit down hard on Zhang Lingling's outstretched hand. By chance, her teeth clamped onto Zhang Lingling's pearl bracelet. The bracelet snapped, and the pearl scattered noisily across the floor. Zhang Lingling yanked her hand back, staring at the shattered bracelet on the ground. Her previously calm and arrogant demeanor disappeared. In its place, pure rage filled her face. Her voice grew sharp and venomous. "You filthy wretch! How dare you bite and break the bracelet Uncle Joe gave me? This was a one-of-a-kind custom piece. Unforgivable! You'll pay for this with your life." With Zhang Lingling's shriek, she thrust the knife forward violently, aiming for my sister. PSSST! The blade plunged into my sister's body. Time seemed to freeze in that instant, as blood gushed from the wound. I let out a heart-wrenching scream. No! Zhang Lingling finally realized what she had done. She recoiled in shock, dropping the knife onto the floor with a clatter. Stumbling backward, she looked to Liu Ryan for help, panic written all over her face. Mom, I only meant to teach her a lesson. What do we do now? Struggling against the bodyguards, my bloodshot eyes locked onto them as I roared. You murderers! You'll die miserable deaths for this. Liu Ryan rushed over and slapped me hard across the face, then glaring at my swaying, injured sister. She gritted her teeth and said stubbornly to Zhang Lingling, "This isn't your fault. It was just an accident. What are you all waiting for? Clean this place up immediately." Grabbing her bag, she pulled Zhang Lingling away in a panic. Today is Joe Lizzie's birthday. If we don't hurry, we'll miss the chance to celebrate with him properly. Let's go! After Liu Ryan left, the rest of the onlookers quickly dispersed as well. The moment I broke free from the bodyguard's hold, I threw myself beside my sister. Sister! How are you? Don't be afraid. Your brother is here. I'll take you to the hospital right now. Scooping her up in my arms, I ran as fast as I could, but the weight of her body on my shoulders grew heavier, and her breathing grew fainter. I knew it was too late. Her hand slowly fell limp, even in her last moments. She whispered to me, "Brother, I just wanted to live a good life with you. Why is it so hard?" I had no words to offer her. All I could do was hold her growingly cold body tightly in my arms. For a long time, I gripped the fruit knife that had taken her life. Kicking open the door to Joe Lizzie's penthouse hospital room, the mother and daughter, seated comfortably at either side of him, turned their heads at the commotion, seeing me covered in dirt, with bloodstains on my clothes. Liu Ryan frowned in displeasure and scolded me harshly. "Zhang He! What do you think you're doing?" I charged at them like a madman. I reached out and grabbed Joe Lizzie by the neck, dragging him off the bed. I pulled him toward the window. With one swift motion, the mother and daughter froze in shock, their faces contorting with fear. I looked utterly deranged. Yanking the tightly closed window open, the night wind was piercingly cold, rushing into the previously warm hospital room. Everyone present shivered involuntarily, seeing their precious Bai Yuguang being held at knife point by me. Liu Ryan's face was filled with disbelief. "Zhang He, have you completely lost your mind? How dare you do this to Joe Lizzie? Let him go immediately, or I swear I'll send you back to prison, this time to die in there." I glared at her fiercely, my heart consumed by hatred. In my mind, all I could see was the image of my sister lying still in the yard, her blooded, lifeless body etched into my memory. "You're absolutely right," I growled. "I am crazy. Crazy for ever believing that someone as cruel as you might spare me and my sister. You killed her. Now I'll make you pay with blood. Let's see how it feels to lose someone you love. As my voice rose to a desperate roar, Zhang Lingling's face twisted with defiance and fury. Why are you mourning that worthless trash? I'm the one who shares your bloodline. Why do you always care about others? Don't forget, I'm your only daughter. The only one who can take care of you when you're old. Her words were barely out of her mouth. I couldn't help but burst into laughter, mocking her with a bitter smile. Take care of me when I'm old? A daughter who used false testimony to send her own father to prison. Who would ever count on someone like that for care in old age? Besides, my body has been destroyed by the two of you. I'll never live long enough to need it. Your lofty excuses only fool yourself, Zhang Lingling. You always accuse me of not treating you as my daughter. But what have you ever done to deserve that title? When you were little, you were frail and sickly. You couldn't even swallow medicine. I stayed up countless nights taking care of you. Try every possible way to help you recover. I don't even remember how many times I vomited from trying your medicine myself. When you were 2, you suddenly became fascinated by iron flower displays. You cried and begged to see them, ignoring how hot the molten iron was. I learned how to do it for you, burning countless blisters onto my hands in the process. I always believed I was a decent father. But you blindly listened to Liu Ryan, convinced that Zhou Lizzie was the ideal father figure. After all these years, have you ever shown me even a hint of gratitude? And I know the truth, Zhang Lingling. You were there when Zhou Lizzie jumped from the window, afraid of Liu Ryan blaming you. You lied in front of everyone, claiming I was the one in the hospital room that day. You caused me to be imprisoned for a crime I didn't commit. But even with me out of the way, the two of you still weren't satisfied. Not only did you persecute me relentlessly, but you also targeted my family. All these years, what have I ever done to wrong you? Why did you have to push me to the brink of despair? Why do you still hunt me down even after my release from prison? Will you only stop when my entire family is dead and destroyed? My sister merely pleaded with you, and you sentenced her to death for it. Is Zhou Lizzie's life the only one that matters? Does my sister's life mean nothing? Can she be treated like dirt, even in death? My hoarse voice echoed through the room, each word spilling out with the anguish of my heart. The sound reverberated, filling the space with my sorrow and fury. I poured out every ounce of bitterness in my chest. For a moment, Liu Ryan and Zhang Lingling seemed stunned by my words, too shaken to respond. I glanced at the starry sky through the window. Tears began to fall. Dad, Mom, Sister, don't be afraid. I'll join you soon. In the next life, we'll still be a family. Raising the knife, I plunged it mercilessly toward Zhou Lizzie's neck. Blood sprayed everywhere. Liu Ryan's face turned pale as a sheet. She let out a piercing scream and lunged toward us without hesitation. Let him go, Zhanghe. You lunatic. I forbid you to hurt him. I knew Liu Ryan couldn't bear to see me harm the man who meant everything to her. Anticipating her reaction, I sidestepped swiftly. Liu Ryan stumbled and charged straight toward the open window. Half of her body was already dangling out of the window. Zhang Lingling, startled, hurried over to pull her back. Mom, be careful. Unfortunately, Zhang Lingling underestimated how much Liu Ryan cared for Zhou Lizzie. After being pulled back inside, Liu Ryan didn't show even the slightest gratitude. When Zhang Lingling approached to check if she was hurt, Liu Ryan, without a second thought, pushed her fiercely toward the window. Zhang Lingling, just a child with a lighter frame, was no match for Liu Ryan's strength. In one swift motion, the roles were reversed. The helper became the one who fell. Zhang Lingling screamed, her voice piercing through the room as she plummeted like a kite with its string cut. In the shocked silence of those watching, her body hit the ground with a sickening thud. Bang! The sound of her impact echoed, and Liu Ryan momentarily forgot about Zhou Lizzie. She rushed to the window, her eyes wide with terror. When she saw the pool of blood below, a horrific scream tore from her throat. Moments later, Liu Ryan, her eyes bloodshot with rage, turned toward me and charged. "This is all your fault. Everything that happened is because of you. I'll make you pay for my daughter's life with your own." But this time, she wasn't met with the meek man she had once controlled. I raised the knife in my hand, letting her body collide with the blade. I stabbed her. Once, twice. Liu Ryan's body trembled in pain, her eyes glaring at me as she slowly crumpled to the floor. The blood pooled beneath her, spreading in a vivid red that seemed to engulf the room. I couldn't help but laugh, lift the knife, and send it into my own heart. The pain is so intense. I can hardly breathe. I fall straight to the ground. But the bright smiles of my parents and sister become clearer and clearer in front of me. I curl my fingers, struggling to grasp in the darkness. When I touch their hands reaching out, tears well up in my eyes. Before I lose consciousness completely, with my last bit of strength, I whisper, "I'm sorry for keeping you waiting, my dearest family. In this life, I've caused you so much suffering. In the next life, I will protect you well." The hospital's emergency treatment was timely. Liu Ruyan's life was saved. But not long after, the police arrested her on charges of murdering Zhang Lingling, intentional injury to Zhang He, among other crimes. These events sparked widespread attention in society. In pursuit of corporate interests, the Liu group quickly abandoned Liu Ruyan. Without the protection of the Liu family, Liu Ruyan soon became the target of everyone's bullying. Those she had once tormented stepped forward, using every method in prison to torture her. The suffering I once endured, Liu Ruyan tasted each of them one by one, until this moment. She finally understood how much pain her reckless actions had brought me. Under the dual torment of body and mind, Liu Ruyan finally fell. On the morning of her death, the dark clouds that had covered the sky were driven away by the sunlight. From then on, the world was peaceful. The end of the story.